We met for the first time on the morning of day 2, but we didn't really meet. We exchanged words outside the privy at the shelter where Raiden had been staying. And then I kept on going down the trail by myself that day. Then I spent the afternoon on day 2 hiking with Raiden and Red and Tavna. And we all camped together at Gooch Mountain Shelter on the second night. Raiden and I shared a tent pad outside the shelter.
Still in our individual tent.
I stopped off the shelter earlier on to use the loo and met a bunch more people. And then day 3, the morning, I set off by myself again, and I don't remember when in that day you caught up.
About lunchtime.
Probably.
That day and the couple after. I caught up around lunchtime, give or take.
Yeah, and then, so we went over Blood Mountain on day 3 and into Neil's Gap together. And then after that, we pretty much walked the whole rest of the trail within sight of each other.
Yeah.
There was a few times where we didn't walk together. One time in particular stands out where I went to go to the toilet off trail and you walked off without me. And it took,
not on purpose.
It took me a couple of hours to catch up.
I assumed she was off in front of me somewhere.
So, but most of the trail we walked the whole rest of the way together. I didn't plan on being in a relationship on trail, and I'd actually almost made an agreement with myself that I was going to avoid getting friendly with people too quickly or joining into a tramily or anything like that. I jumped into a trail family pretty quickly on the PCT, and I decided that I wanted to take a bit more time to kind of feel people out on the AT before getting really friendly, which is kind of funny to look back at now because we did the complete opposite of that.
I also made an agreement with myself that I was not going to get into a relationship specifically when I was on trail, and I was planning on walking by myself for the vast majority of it and meeting people as I went, but really trying to not get attached to anybody in particular or anything like that. And wow, that did not last very long.
You made it a day and a half.
Yeah.
Well, we both made it a day and a half, I guess.
Being in a relationship on trail changed several things about the through hike compared to what I expected prior to hiking. And the first major change happened in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, where I had originally planned to meet my parents there prior to the trail. And now, after I had met Chili, that would have been, or it was the first time that my parents and Chili met. So we had to go through that little bit of stress. And then on top of that, Chili got sick directly after meeting my parents. And so then the decision point came that deciding whether or not I was going to wait on her to get healthy or move on my own. And I was sure that I was waiting pretty early on, but I think neither Chili nor my parents were sure that was going to be the case. And it actually surprised my parents that somebody I had just met was already changing my plans for the trail.
Well, I distinctly remember, sort of saying, I'm too sick to keep walking. I'm staying here. Like, what do you want to do? And I really thought at that stage that it could have gone either way. We hadn't known each other that long. But pretty glad you stayed because we realistically might not have seen each other again had I stayed in Gatlinburg and he kept walking.
Yeah, that could have been one of the deciding factors for us.
Yeah. We also made a decision pretty early on that we wanted to share a tent. So we both started the trail in one-man tents and then organised. I had a 2-man tent with all of my things at a friend's house. So I organised for that to get sent out, and we switched to a 2-man tent at trail days. And that it kind of happened the first time we went through Damascus. The post office was closed. We couldn't pick it up then. And so the second time when we came back to Damascus for trail days, I picked up my tent and sent both of our one-man tents home with Raiden's parents, who we saw again at trail days, and continued on with a two-man tent. It was a tent that I had because on the PCT I needed a new tent, and it was very cheap and relatively light for its
It would have been
cost.
just fine for a single person sleeping in the middle of the tent,
Yeah.
but the edges, that's where the splashback happens. So
And in-
two people, that happens.
And in reality, two people don't want to thru-hike in a two-person tent.
Yeah.
You know, a three-man tent or a 2.5-man tent, if such things exist, would be much better suited for two people.
Right. So if we had planned from the beginning, from before the trail to hike together, we probably would have ended up in a slightly bigger tent.
Yeah.
Rather than getting one pre-owned. So in addition to changing our housing plans on trail, both of us also stayed in hotels and hostels more often than we probably would have if we were hiking solo. Initially starting the trail, I planned to not shower or stay in hotels nearly as often as I ended up doing. And I think we stayed in hotels in particular more often because with two of us we were able to split the cost, and so we kind of upgraded our housing from hostels and bunk rooms to private hotel rooms and things like that.
Yeah, and based on my prior trail experience, I was much more likely to, had we not met, share a hotel room with maybe 4 or 5 or 6 people. A lot of people on trail end up forming a Tramily, and a Tramily is a trail family, which is essentially just a group of people who hike together for a significant portion of the trail.
We kind of discussed on trail that one of the reasons we may have not ended up in a Tramily was because we were in a partnership, and finding a third wheel to go with our relationship was the first hurdle. And that if we ever found a solid third wheel to be with us, maybe we would have ended up forming up into a Tramily. We did hike with a third and fourth person for a little while there, but then ended up getting split off for this reason or that, and it just never ended up happening. And it turned out that there were a few Tramilies that we ran into, but we think that the majority of hiking groups were in groups of 2.
Yeah, and usually either 2 men walking together or 2 women walking together. Very rarely did we come across a couple who weren't in a relationship hiking together. Although we didn't become part of a Tramily, we did hike around people a lot. So we hiked around the Corey family, which is a family of 5 who were hiking the trail together. Simba and Platypus we saw quite a lot, as well as Dundee and Sandpig and all sorts of others who we, would see them in town or would see them on trail now and then. We wouldn't necessarily make plans to stay with them or to see them, but we just kind of kept running into each other, which is a really nice way to be. Kind of having friends but not feeling that tie to, try and organise your life around each other, which I think is something that happens a lot in Tramilies, where you end up making sacrifices about the way you want to do the trail in order to maintain that social relationship.
I think that going into the trail, my thought was that the hardest part for me would be coming back to society, the post-trail aspect of it. And being in a relationship definitely changed how that all played out. Because afterwards we were able to share those experiences with each other and understand what we had both just gone through. Even though there were plenty of people that showed interest in our thru-hike and were asking plenty of questions, no one really was able to grasp the magnitude of what we had just been through, given that they hadn't been through it themselves, which that makes complete sense. But if we had to go through that on our own, surrounded by people who weren't thru-hikers, I have to believe that it would have been much harder to both communicate the experience that we just had and to kind of reintegrate back in with people who had just been continuing with their lives and hadn't felt time pass the same way that we just had.
And that matches my experience when comparing coming off the Appalachian Trail to when I came off the PCT or the Tiaroa. When I came off both of those trails, I got back to work and I just didn't really want to be there. I really just wanted to be back on trail And especially because, you know, so much had happened, and for everybody back at work, 6 months had just passed and they'd gone to work every day. So we were in a different mindset.
And there's also the feeling some people have that you've just been on a long holiday. And so they don't understand maybe why you aren't quite ready to get back to work, or why your motivation to, you know, have a normal life again isn't very high.
I definitely think hanging out with you has meant that, like, I don't have the same, like, desire to be back on trail, because we can, you know, talk about the trail, and, you know, we had those shared experiences that we can go through.
Yeah, and I think being in a relationship actually reinforces that, because it's a new relationship. You know, it started on trail and we hiked together, and now it's like continuing the adventure post-trail. And then we continued to move around. We went to Canada together for a while, and now we're back. I'm back in the U.S., and it's just a constant changing environment for us, and we're doing it all together. So it's not so dissimilar from through hiking.
Except for the fact that next week I have to go back to Canada by myself.
Yeah, well, we'll deal with that when it comes to.